Hello everybody, my name is Michael and welcome back to Last of First. The season opener at Bahrain is finally upon us and I am excited to get the season underway. Bahrain is a great track, normally has some good races and some hard-fought battles, so I'm certainly looking forward to it. Can't believe it's already the start of the new season, and yeah, let's get into things. I figured it would be fun to do some predictions for the race ahead, and this is before any type of practice or anything like that. This is pretty soon after preseason testing, so who really knows anything, but I've got some hunches about a few things and ready to throw my predictions out there and see what happens. So let's get started. So for qualifying, which is on a Friday this year, weirdly enough, the first two races of the year are Saturday races, Friday qualifying, a little behind on the times for Ramadan. But yeah, I got to remember that so I don't miss anything. But I'm going to predict the top five in qualifying and in the race. So starting with number 5 in qualifying, I'm going with Lewis Hamilton. I think the Mercedes look pretty decent. It seems to be right in the mix there, second, third, fourth fastest. That all seems pretty tight there behind Red Bull. But yeah, I think Hamilton is going to start off with hitting the ground running, and I think it's going to be a good start for Mercedes in qualifying with a 5th for Hamilton. Next up, 4th, I'm going to go with George Russell. So yes, I'm putting some decent faith in Mercedes that they're going to have some decent pace and start out relatively strong to begin the season. So we'll see what happens there if I'm completely wrong, but we'll know in a few days' time. Now, for 3rd in qualifying, I'm going with Carlos Sainz. Yeah, I mean, most people seem to think that Ferrari is the second quickest team. Maybe starting to challenge Red Bull depending on the circumstances, but it does appear that they are going to be the second fastest, but maybe relatively close to Mercedes and McLaren. But I do think they are going to have the slight edge over Mercedes and McLaren, particularly in qualifying where the Ferrari has been good in the past. But of course, their race pace was looking pretty tasty in preseason qualifying. So with that, predicting that Sainz will be number 3 in qualifying. Now, to most people's surprise, 2nd place for qualifying, I'm going with Max Verstappen. Now, I think Verstappen's definitely the favorite to win the race and to win the championship overall. But similar to last year, I think qualifying is going to be very similar. And it seems like the Ferrari have made a step in the right direction, which is good. And of course, Leclerc is one of the best qualifiers on the grid. So those combinations, I think, will be pretty impactful on Verstappen getting 2nd in qualifying. But yeah, just going back to last year and even the year before, just this new era of rules for Red Bull. They've really focused on the race pace of the car and less so on the qualifying pace. Obviously, the qualifying pace has still been quite strong, but I think it will continue to be a slight weak point for Red Bull, and I think Ferrari will be able to capitalize that. So I kind of alluded to it before, but pole position for the Bahrain qualifying, I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc. Yeah, I think the Ferrari is looking strong, and I think there's no reason why Leclerc can't pull a pole position out of the bag if they are anywhere near Red Bull, particularly in qualifying. And yeah, we'll see how that is in the race, but I think qualifying will be very close. Now, interestingly enough, you may have noticed that I don't have Perez in the top 5. And I do think the Red Bull is going to definitely be the fastest car and the best car of the season, more than likely the whole season, but particularly the first race of the weekend. First race of the season, I'm sorry. But I just don't have Perez cracking into that top 5 in qualifying in particular. I think his struggles of last year are just going to continue to filter over. Hopefully not as bad for his sake, but he's never been the fastest qualifier at Red Bull, particularly compared to Verstappen, but just in general, he's kind of struggled, and I don't see why that won't continue to be a problem in qualifying, especially with a car that's mostly an evolution of last year, but definitely has some major changes. But I'm sure the characteristics will be relatively similar. So yeah, I don't envision Perez getting into the top 5. I think he's going to struggle in qualifying, but have a much stronger race. Now, you may have also noticed that I do not have McLaren in the top 5. And that might be a surprise to some of you, but overall, I wasn't overly impressed with McLaren in preseason testing. I wasn't disappointed, but I thought they would make at least show off a bit more gains than what they're appearing to have so far. But even then, McLaren just hasn't done very well the past few years here in Bahrain. I know they should have a much more competitive package this year compared to the previous years, but something about Bahrain just doesn't really suit the McLaren, and it doesn't seem like they've gotten rid of all of their quirks and flaws with the car in this new year. So I think they're going to struggle a little bit this weekend, even though I think it will be a much better season overall, particularly at the beginning compared to what McLaren had last year. Moving ahead to the race, my predictions for that, the top 5 here, starting with 5th, I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton. I think he will have the edge over George Russell in race pace again, even though I think in qualifying Russell might just have him beat, but it is going to be very close. I think Hamilton is going to continue to show his superior racecraft, and I think he wants to really stamp down his authority, even though he is leaving the team at the end of this year. I think he's going to want to put on a show for his last year at Mercedes. So I think Hamilton will be able to get ahead of Russell, and I think a 5th place is going to be a solid result for Hamilton. Now, 4th place, I'm going to go with Carlos Sainz. I think he'll have a pretty strong race, but I think some of the other people ahead will just have that bit of edge over him, whether it's the car or just the driver in general. But I still think it will be a strong showing for Sainz in the first race of the weekend. Now, 3rd place, starting on the podium positions, I'm going to go with Sergio Perez. Yeah, so I think, like I said, it's going to be a similar dealio to last year. I think he'll struggle a bit in qualifying and then have better races. And I think Perez isn't going to be too far outside the top 5 in qualifying, so I think he'll be able to crawl his way back into the top 5 in the race, and I think he'll be able to get a podium for the first race of the weekend. So I think it'll be a much stronger race for Perez than it will be qualifying for him. Going on to 2nd place, I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc. I think based on that, you can probably imagine who I think will be the winner. But I think it's going to be a continuation of the terrible stats for Leclerc, unfortunately, this year, and more just for Ferrari in general. They're just not going to have quite the race pace to be able to be super competitive in the race. I don't think they'll have quite enough to challenge the Red Bulls, and unfortunately, I think Leclerc is going to fall victim to another pole, but not another win. And with that said, for the winner, I'm going to have to go with Verstappen. Yes, I think anytime Leclerc gets a pole, pretty much inevitable that Verstappen gets the win these days. And yeah, kind of joking there, but it does seem like it probably will be a similar case this year as it was last year. Hopefully it'll be a bit tighter up at the front there, but that's what I do imagine will happen. So moving on to a few more fun predictions, starting off with my bold prediction for the weekend. I'm going to go with a McLaren double DNF. Yes, sorry, McLaren fans. But like I said, this track normally doesn't do too well for McLaren, and I think it's going to be a really hard start to the season for them. And yeah, I think they're both going to have a double DNF. They had some issues in qualifying, or I'm sorry, not in qualifying, in preseason testing with some reliability concerns, whether that was the fuel pump, some issues with the floor, different things like that. And yeah, I think some things might creep their way into the race for Piastri and Norris, and I think it's going to lead them to a double DNF, as sad as that is. Next up for the masterclass of the weekend, I'm going to go with RB. I think they are looking quite strong to start off the year here, and I think they're going to be the best of the rest in terms of the top, 4 or 5 teams? Yes, 5 teams. I think they're going to have a strong outing. I think Ricciardo and Tsunoda are going to perform pretty strong, and the team just looks like they have a generally a pretty quick car. So I think they're going to have a strong first weekend, maybe double points for them. And yeah, I think they're just going to execute it really well and have a good start to this new era as Visa Cash App RB. Yeah. Lastly, for my disaster class of the weekend prediction, I'm doubling down on McLaren. I think with the double DNF that I'm predicting them to have, as well as some struggles in the race, I think it's going to be quite the disastrous start to the season for McLaren, as sad as that is. Only time will tell how true all that comes. Hopefully they've got their act together more than I'm anticipating them to have, but I think it's going to be a bit of a struggle for McLaren this weekend. So those are my predictions for the first race of the weekend. What do you guys think about my predictions? What are your predictions? Let me know in the comments down below. Would love to hear them. Any predictions in the future, I'd be happy to chat about on the podcast here. Would love to hear what your guys' thoughts are. So thank you for tuning in. Get ready for my race reviews and any other future content, and I'll see you guys in the next one.